I never imagined a vintage scarf would change my life, but that's exactly what happened last spring at Second Chance thrift store. My name is Bianca, and I probably spend way too much time looking for hidden fashion treasures in racks of old clothes. But that Tuesday was different. I had just spotted a bright orange box sticking out from under a pile of scarves when another hand reached for it at the same time. "Oh, sorry," a deep voice said with a laugh. "Ladies first?" I looked up and met the warmest brown eyes I'd ever seen. The guy was tall, with messy dark hair and a camera hanging around his neck. He had that artsy look that always made my heart flutter. "No, go ahead," I said, trying to sound calm even though my pulse was racing. "I was just being curious." "Actually, I could use your opinion," he said, picking up the box and opening it carefully. Inside was a perfect silk scarf with swirls of blue and gold. "I'm doing a vintage-themed photo shoot tomorrow, but I don't know anything about fashion. Is this something special?" I couldn't hide my excitement. "That's a real Hermes scarf from the 1970s. See the hand-rolled edges and the artist's signature? It's probably worth at least $800. His eyebrows shot up. "And it's priced at $50? How do you know all this?" "I'm kind of a fashion nerd," I admitted with a smile. "I can spot designer pieces from across the room." "I'm Bianca." "Sonny Owen," he said, shaking my hand. "Fashion nerd, meet photography nerd. Would you want to grab a coffee and teach me more about vintage fashion? I could really use your help for this shoot." That's how it all started. The coffee turned into dinner, dinner turned into dates, and 4 months later, I was completely in love with Sonny. Everything felt perfect until I met his sister, Rosalie. The first time I met her was at their parents' house for Friday dinner. I had spent hours picking the perfect outfit, a vintage Toledo von Furstenberg wrap dress I'd found for $100. Sonny's parents, Brianna and Francis, were warm and kind, but Rosalie's smile didn't quite reach her eyes. "Oh, how creative of you to wear second-hand clothes," she said, sipping her wine. "I could never."
Who knows where they've been?
"Rosalie," Brianna said, her tone warning. Rosalie just shrugged. "I'm just saying, if you're going to be part of the Owen family, you might want to upgrade your wardrobe. We have certain standards to maintain." I felt my face go hot as Sonny gave my hand a quick squeeze under the table. "Actually, Bianca has an amazing talent for fashion," he said. "She's helping style my upcoming magazine shoot." "Really?" Rosalie's perfectly shaped eyebrows lifted. "How interesting. You know, I just got engaged to Paul Will. Of Will Industries, of course. We're planning the wedding of the season." Something about her tone made me uneasy, but I tried to shake it off. This was Sonny's sister, after all. I needed to make a good impression. Later that night, as Sonny drove me home, I noticed him glancing at me, looking concerned. "I'm sorry about Rosalie," he said. "She can be a lot sometimes." "It's fine," I replied, even though it wasn't. "She's probably just being protective of her family." What I didn't tell him was how Rosalie had been watching me all night, studying everything I said and did. I didn't mention how she'd cornered me in the kitchen, firing off questions about my life, my job, and my future plans. And I definitely didn't tell him about her reaction when I mentioned wanting a small, simple wedding someday, the way she smiled, like I'd just handed her some kind of weapon. I didn't realize then that this was just the beginning. Rosalie Owen was about to turn my life into her own personal chess game. Looking back now, I wish I'd seen it coming. Just like vintage treasures, people can have a history, sometimes, one filled with hidden darkness beneath their shiny exterior. The next few weeks were a blur of family dinners and polite, forced smiles. I kept hoping things would get better with Rosalie, but every interaction left me feeling more like an outsider. Tonight was supposed to be different. A casual barbecue at the Owen house to celebrate Sonny's latest magazine cover. I arrived early to help Brianna in the kitchen, wearing a vintage Chanel blazer I'd carefully restored myself. As I chopped vegetables, Brianna touched the fabric of my blazer, smiling warmly. "You have such a gift, Bianca," she said. "The way you bring these old pieces back to life. I hope you know Francis, and I think you're wonderful for Sonny." Before I could respond, Rosalie swept into the room, looking like she'd stepped straight out of a Gucci ad, wearing what seemed to be the entire latest collection. "Mother," she said, her voice sharp, Paul is bringing his parents tonight. Did you remember the expensive wine I asked for? I thought this was just a family dinner, I said, trying to keep my tone light. Rosalie let out a cold laugh. Oh, didn't Sonny tell you? I turned it into an engagement celebration. Paul's father is considering using Sonny's photography for their company's new campaign. She reached out and touched the sleeve of my blazer, her smile as icy as her laugh. Is this secondhand? How brave of you. I felt my jaw clench, but before I could say anything, Sonny walked in and wrapped his arms around me from behind. Hey, beautiful. That blazer looks amazing on you. It should, Rosalie said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. The real thing costs around $20,000. She turned to her mother. We need to set up the formal dining room instead of eating outside. The Wills aren't exactly the barbecue type. I saw Brianna's face drop. She'd spent the whole day preparing Sonny's favorite grilled dishes. No one understands how important this is for the family, don't you? Rosalie said sweetly, but her sharp eyes were locked on Sonny. Maybe we can do both. Sonny offered, his tone uncertain. Set up inside, but still keep some food on the grill. I felt my heart sink as Brianna quietly started moving the dishes indoors. This was supposed to be Sonny's celebration, but once again, Rosalie had taken over, just like she seemed to be doing with every other part of our lives. During dinner, I ended up sitting between Paul's mother, who kept asking if my blazer was some sort of costume, and Rosalie, who didn't miss a chance to brag about the high-end designer boutiques she was considering for her wedding dress. Of course, Bianca probably has some creative ideas for her own wedding, Rosalie suddenly said, turning to me with a fake smile. What were you thinking? Something vintage, I assume? The table went quiet. Sonny and I hadn't even talked about marriage yet. I felt my face heat up as everyone waited for me to answer. I haven't really. Oh, that's right. Rosalie cut me off. You haven't set a date yet. Or even gotten engaged. She reached over and patted my hand. Don't worry. When it happens, I'll help you plan everything. I'll have plenty of experience after my wedding. Francis cleared his throat, clearly uncomfortable. Rosalie, maybe we could focus on celebrating Sonny's success tonight. Of course, Daddy. Rosalie raised her glass with a smile. To Sonny's success. And to family. Later, as the guests were leaving, I overheard Rosalie talking to Paul in the hallway. Poor thing, she said, her voice low but sharp. She tries so hard to fit in, but you can't buy class, can you? I mean, showing up in second-hand clothes to meet your parents. She seemed nice enough, Paul replied, his tone polite. And that blazer was actually quite elegant. Oh, honey, you're too kind, Rosalie said, laughing lightly. But trust me, she's not Owen material. Sonny will figure that out soon enough. My stomach twisted as I slipped away before they could see me. My hands shook as I gathered my things in the kitchen. I found Francis at the sink, quietly washing dishes. Without looking up, he said softly, "Don't let her get to you." Some people mistake cruelty for sophistication. I nodded, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. As I waited for Sonny to drive me home, I caught my reflection in the window. For the first time, my beloved vintage blazer didn't feel like a statement. It felt like a costume. I started to wonder if loving Sonny was worth the cost of fitting into his world. What I didn't realize then was that Rosalie was far from finished. Her next move would force me to choose between keeping the peace and standing up for myself. The moment everything changed happened at the Owen family lake house. Sonny had proposed the night before, during a beautiful sunset that felt like something out of a dream. I should have known Rosalie wouldn't let me enjoy even a full day of happiness. I was helping Brianna in the kitchen when I realized I'd left my engagement ring upstairs after washing my hands. I went to Sonny's old bedroom to grab it, but as I got closer, I heard Rosalie's voice through the slightly open door. "This timing is perfect," she was saying. "Now I can use all of Bianca's wedding ideas for my own. She'll never suspect I've been collecting them for months." I froze, my hand hovering over the doorknob. "Are you sure that's necessary?" Paul's voice replied, sounding hesitant. "Your brother just got engaged." "Oh, please," Rosalie said with a dismissive laugh. Their wedding is going to be some quirky vintage affair. I'm doing everyone a favor by turning her ideas into something actually sophisticated. Besides, Sunny's told me everything. Her dress design, the venue she wants, even the antique lace she found for the veil. My stomach twisted. Those were private moments I'd shared with Sunny, dreaming about our future together. He had promised to keep them just between us. Speaking of which, Rosalie added, I already called her dream venue and booked it for the weekend before their date. The deposit cleared this morning. Won't that seem a little obvious? Paul asked, sounding uncomfortable. That's the best part, Rosalie said smugly. She'll look crazy if she accuses me of copying her. Everyone will think she's the one trying to steal ideas from me. I must have made a noise because the conversation suddenly stopped. Heart pounding, I turned and hurried back downstairs, gripping the railing tightly to steady myself. In the kitchen, Sunny was helping his mom toss a salad. He smiled when he saw me, but his smile quickly faded when he noticed the look on my face. Hey, what's wrong? He asked, concern in his voice. Can we talk? I said, my voice shaking despite my effort to sound calm. Privately, out on the deck, the lake sparkled in the bright summer sun, mocking me with its peaceful beauty. I turned to face Sunny, trying to hold back the storm of emotions building inside me. Have you been telling Rosalie about our wedding plans? I asked, my voice tight. Well, yeah, he said, looking confused. She's been really interested lately. She said she wants to help. Isn't that a good thing? I shook my head, my frustration spilling over. She's planning to steal everything, Sunny. I just heard her talking to Paul, I said, my voice trembling with anger. She's already booked our wedding venue. The one I showed you in private. Sunny's face shifted through a series of emotions, surprise, doubt, and then defensiveness.
Come on, he said.
That's got to be a misunderstanding.
Rosalie wouldn't.
Wouldn't what? I snapped. Deliberately try to hurt me? That's all she's done since I met her. The words spilled out before I could stop them. You're overreacting, he said, using a calm, dismissive tone that made me want to scream. She's my sister, Bianca. She's just excited about weddings right now. Before I could respond, Rosalie appeared in the doorway, wearing an expression of fake concern that made my skin crawl. Is everything okay out here? She asked sweetly. I thought I heard raised voices. Did you book Spring Arbor of Fredericksburg for your wedding? Asked her directly. Oh, that, she said, flashing a bright smile. Yes, isn't it perfect? I remembered how much you loved it when you mentioned it at dinner last month. I hope you don't mind, great minds think alike, right? I turned to Sunny, waiting for him to say something, anything to defend me. He shifted uncomfortably, avoiding my eyes. Maybe we could all he started. Just what? I interrupted, my voice shaking as I slipped off my engagement ring. Just pretend this isn't happening? Just let her steal every part of our wedding like she's been planning for months. Bianca, don't be dramatic, Rosalie said, her voice dripping with fake concern. If you're not ready to plan a wedding, just say so. I placed the ring on the deck railing, my vision blurred with tears. You're right, I said, my voice breaking. I'm not ready. Not for this family, not for a husband who won't stand up for me, and definitely not for a sister-in-law who treats my life like it's her personal catalog. As I turned to leave, I heard Sunny call my name, but it was Rosalie's voice that followed me, cold and smug.
See?
I told you, she wasn't Owen material. I got in my car and drove away, not knowing where I was headed. What I didn't realize then was that this wasn't the end. It was the start of something new, something I hadn't seen coming. 5 days later, while I was at work sorting through vintage dresses, Francis Owen walked into my shop. He looked completely out of place, his expensive suit a sharp contrast to the worn wooden floors and racks of second-hand clothes. Interesting place you've got here, he said, running his finger along a 1960s Dior dress. Brianna mentioned you restore these. I nodded, unable to speak. Was Francis here to convince me to come back? To defend Rosalie? Sunny's been miserable, he said, but his tone wasn't harsh. Though I suspect that's not entirely because of losing you. What do you mean? I asked quietly. The Wills pulled their advertising campaign, he explained. Apparently, Paul had concerns about working with our family. He picked up a vintage brooch from the display case, turning it over in his hand. Rosalie is blaming you, of course. My hands froze on the dress I was mending. I haven't spoken to Paul. No, but Paul isn't blind or stupid. Francis set the brooch down carefully. He came by the house yesterday, asking questions about Rosalie's sudden interest in vintage weddings and unique venues. Before I could respond, the shop door chimed. Sonny walked in, stopping short when he saw his father. Dad, what are you doing here? Just leaving, actually, Francis said, squeezing my shoulder as he passed. Remember what I said about authenticity, Bianca? Some things can't be copied, no matter how hard people try. After he left, Sonny and I stood there in uncomfortable silence. He looked exhausted, his usually neat hair messy, like he'd been running his hands through it. You left your ring, he said finally. You left me to face my sister alone. I shook my head, picking up a damaged silk scarf and focusing on its torn edges. She's been systematically trying to ruin anything good in my life, and you've been letting her. Helping her even. She's my sister, he said, sounding defensive. And I was supposed to be your wife, I said, my voice cracking on the last word. But you couldn't even tell her to stop when she was stealing our wedding plans? He sighed and ran a hand through his hair again. I didn't think. He trailed off, clearly frustrated. Look, I brought something to show you. He pulled out his phone and handed it to me. It was a series of texts from Rosalie. My stomach twisted as I read them. Detailed questions about my wedding ideas, references to private conversations Sonny and I had shared, and even photos she'd asked him to take of my design sketches.
See?
She was just excited about wedding planning, Sonny said, like that explained everything. She wanted to help. I stared at him, the realization hitting me like a cold wave. He truly didn't see what was happening, or worse, he didn't want to. Your father said Paul pulled the advertising campaign, I said, my voice quiet but firm. I spoke softly, my voice barely steady. Did you ever stop to wonder why? Sonny's face darkened with confusion. Rosalie said you must have said something to Paul. Of course, she did, I said, letting out a bitter laugh. And you believed her. Just like you always do. The shop door chimed again, and this time it was Paul. He looked uncomfortable but determined. Sorry to interrupt, he said, glancing between us. Bianca, could we talk about Rosalie? Sonny immediately stepped between us. Whatever she told you about my sister, it's not true. She hasn't told me anything. Paul cut in, his tone firm. That's why I'm here. I need to know if I'm making a mistake trusting Rosalie. The irony wasn't lost on me. Rosalie's fiancé coming to me for the truth, while her own brother stood there defending her lies. I turned to Sonny, giving him one last chance. Do you want to tell him about the texts? About how your sister has been planning to steal my wedding, piece by piece. Sonny didn't say a word. His silence spoke louder than anything he could have said. I took a deep breath, blinking back tears. I think you should go, I told him, my voice breaking. Both of you. Whatever Rosalie is or isn't doing, it's not my problem anymore. As they walked out, I heard Paul ask Sonny, did you really not see what she was doing to Bianca? I didn't hear Sonny's response, but I didn't need to. His silence had already told me everything I needed to know about where his loyalties lay. What I didn't realize was that Paul's visit would set off a chain of events that would change everything, not just for me and Sonny, but for the entire Owen family. 2 weeks later, I received an invitation to Rosalie's wedding. It wasn't just any invitation. It was an exact replica of the custom design I'd sketched in my private journal. The one I'd only ever shown to Sonny. My hands shook as I read the date, 3 weeks before what would have been my wedding day. I was still staring at the invitation when Brianna called. Her voice was strained. I know this is awkward, she began, but Rosalie insists you come. She says it would mean so much to her. I'm sure it would, I said, tracing the delicate pattern I had spent months designing. Did she tell you where she got the invitation design? There was a long pause. Bianca, please, Brianna said softly. She's trying to make amends? By stealing my wedding? The bitterness in my voice surprised even me. Actually, Brianna hesitated. That's part of why I'm calling. Rosalie wants you to help with her dress. She says your vintage expertise would be perfect for the alteration she needs. I almost laughed. What dress? The one she found at that little boutique in London, Brianna said softly. The 1960s Dior, you mentioned loving. My stomach dropped. I had told Sunny about that dress during a late-night conversation, describing how I dreamed of recreating it for our wedding. And now Rosalie had somehow tracked down the original. No, I said firmly. Bianca, please, Brianna pleaded, her voice cracking. Things are so tense in the family. Francis barely speaks to Sunny, Paul is questioning everything, and Rosalie, she's not herself. Maybe if you helped, if you showed her some kindness. Kindness? I interrupted, my voice rising. Like the kindness she showed me when she stole every single detail of my wedding? Or the kindness Sunny showed by helping her do it? Before Brianna could respond, the shop door chimed. Rosalie walked in, wearing a triumphant smile and carrying a garment bag. I'll call you back, I said quickly, hanging up before Brianna could say anything else. Surprise, Rosalie sang, laying the bag across my counter. I need your magic touch with this. It's a bit delicate, and you're the only one I trust. She unzipped the bag, revealing the exact dress I had dreamed of wearing. The ivory silk was as stunning as I had imagined. How did you find it? I asked, my voice hollow. Oh, Sunny mentioned how much you loved it, she said casually, her smile as sweet as poison. I had my connections track it down. She placed a hand on my arm. Consider this my olive branch. Help me with the alterations, and maybe we can put all this unpleasantness behind us. I stared at her, and for the first time, I saw everything clearly. This wasn't about a wedding. This was about control, about breaking me, piece by piece. No, I said quietly. Excuse me? She asked, her voice sharp. I said no. I zipped the garment bag closed and pushed it back toward her. Take your dress and get out of my shop. Her smile vanished. You're being ridiculous. This is my wedding we're talking about. No, I said, my voice steady. This was supposed to be my wedding. My dress, my designs, my dreams. But you couldn't stand that, could you? You had to take everything just to prove you could. You don't deserve any of it. Her expression twisted, the mask slipping. You're nothing but a second-hand shop girl who got lucky with my brother. I'm doing him a favor by showing him who you really are. And who are you, Rosalie? I asked, stepping around the counter, anger giving me strength. Besides a thief of other people's dreams? She grabbed the garment bag, her face flushed with fury. You'll regret this. When I'm done, you won't have anything left. Not your designs, not your reputation, and definitely not my brother. She stormed out, slamming the door behind her. I noticed Paul standing just outside the shop window, his face dark with anger. He had heard everything. I should have felt satisfied, knowing Rosalie had finally shown her true colors to her fiancé. But instead, I felt hollow. I knew what came next would be worse than anything she had done so far. Rosalie Owen didn't just want my wedding anymore. She wanted to destroy me completely. And I was running out of ways to stop her. I shouldn't have gone to Rosalie's wedding, but something pulled me there. Maybe the same curiosity that makes people slow down to look at car crashes. I slipped into the church just as the ceremony began, staying in the shadows at the back where no one could see me. Everything was mine. The vintage lace draped along the pews. The hand-pressed flower arrangements. Even the exact shade of ivory I had spent months tracking down. But seeing Rosalie in my dream dress, that was the final twist of the knife. Beautiful ceremony, isn't it? I jumped, startled. Francis Owen stood beside me, his expression calm but unreadable. She stole everything, I whispered, my voice shaking. Every single detail. I know, he said quietly. He handed me his phone. On the screen were photos of my wedding planning journal, every page, photographed and saved. Sunny sent these to her months ago, he explained. I found them while checking the family cloud storage. My stomach churned. He gave her everything? He thought he was helping. Francis's voice sounded tired. And he still doesn't see what she's really doing. The wedding march began to play. I froze as I recognized it. The exact vintage recording I had discovered in an old record shop. I watched Rosalie walk down the aisle, floating in my dress, with my smile, surrounded by my dreams. Paul stood at the altar, his face tight and unreadable. For a brief moment, our eyes met, and I saw something in his expression, an apology, maybe? Then Rosalie reached him, and the ceremony began. I should have left then. But I stayed, rooted to the spot, watching as the priest asked the question, "Does anyone have any objections?" The silence was heavy, almost suffocating. Then Paul cleared his throat. "I do," he said quietly. "I object." The church erupted into whispers. Rosalie's face went pale. "Paul," she stammered, her voice unsteady. "What are you doing?" He turned to her, his voice firm. "I can't marry someone who builds their happiness on someone else's pain." He faced the guests, his words cutting through the tension. Everything about this wedding was stolen. The dress, the decorations, even the music. It was all copied from Bianca's plans. Plans that Rosalie took without permission. That's ridiculous. Rosalie's voice rose, sharp and defensive. "Sonny, tell them." Sonny stood from his seat in the front row, looking utterly confused, caught between his sister and the truth. "I just shared some ideas with you," Sonny said, his voice shaky. "You told me you wanted to help." "Help." Paul let out a bitter laugh. "Is that what you call tearing apart your brother's relationship and stealing every detail of his wedding?" "It's not stealing if he gave them to me," Rosalie shouted, her mask finally slipping. Her voice turned cold. "Besides, I did her a favor. Someone like her doesn't deserve an Owen family wedding. She's nothing but a second-hand shop girl who has more class in her little finger than you'll ever have," Francis interrupted, his voice ringing out over the stunned guests. "And who just showed everyone in this room who you really are." The silence that followed was overwhelming. I looked around at the guests, their faces filled with shock. Paul stood with quiet dignity. Sonny looked like he was finally starting to understand the damage that had been done. But it was Rosalie's face that stopped me, pure, unfiltered hatred aimed directly at me. "You," she snarled, pointing at me. "You planned this. You turned everyone against me." She lunged, but not at me. Instead, she grabbed the vintage lace runner from the nearest pew and yanked it hard. Flowers and candles toppled to the floor, shattering and scattering everywhere. In seconds, she was ripping through the decorations, destroying everything she had stolen. "Rosalie, stop!" Sonny shouted, grabbing for her arm, but she shoved him away. "This is your fault," she screamed at me. "You took everything from me, my brother, my fiancé, my family's respect. I'll make sure you never have anything of your own." It took security to finally pull her away. I caught Sonny's eye, and the guilt and shame on his face should have felt like a victory. Instead, it just made me feel hollow. As the chaos swirled around me, I slipped out unnoticed. But as I reached the door, I heard Rosalie's final scream. "This isn't over, Bianca. I'll make you pay for this." Walking home in the fading light, her words echoed in my mind. She was right about one thing, it wasn't over. Now I had to decide if protecting myself was worth the risk of destroying what little was left of the Owen family. And the truth was, I wasn't sure I could live with either choice. The next morning, as I opened the shop, I found Rosalie waiting outside. She wasn't wearing her usual designer clothes, just jeans and a plain sweater that made her look almost normal. "We need to talk," she said quietly. I unlocked the door and let her in. The shop felt strange, like it was holding its breath for what was about to happen. "I lost everything yesterday," Rosalie said, running her fingers along a rack of vintage dresses. "Paul won't take my calls. Mother can't even look at me. And Sonny," her voice broke, but she quickly recovered. "I didn't make you do any of it," I said firmly, watching her closely. I kept the counter between us, keeping my voice steady. "You chose to steal my wedding plans. You chose to lie. Because you took my brother from me." Rosalie whirled around, her calm facade cracking. "He was all I had, And then you just walked in with your perfect vintage finds, your creative talent, and your authenticity. She spat the word like it was venom. Sonny made his own choices, I said firmly. Did he? She sneered, pulling out her phone. Because he's outside right now, ready to choose again. My heart dropped as Sonny walked in, his face filled with guilt, looking caught between the two of us. Tell her, Rosalie demanded. Tell her what you decided. Sonny avoided my gaze. The family needs to heal, Bianca. We need to move on from this. Maybe if you apologize to Rosalie. Apologized? The word felt like shards of glass in my throat. For turning Paul against her, he continued, for humiliating her at the wedding. I stared at him, feeling the last shred of hope I had for him crumble. You still don't get it, do you? I said quietly. She didn't just steal my wedding plans, Sonny. She tried to steal my entire life, and you helped her do it. I never meant. No, I cut him off. You never meant anything. That's the problem. I turned to Rosalie. You want an apology? Fine. I'm sorry I ever thought I could be part of this family. I'm sorry I wasted months loving someone who couldn't even see what was right in front of him. That's not good enough, Rosalie snapped, her voice shaking. You destroyed my life, so now I'll destroy your business. I've already called every supplier in the city and told them you sell knockoffs as authentic vintage. Actually, a new voice interrupted. You won't be doing that. Paul stood in the doorway, holding a folder. I recorded everything, Rosalie. Every threat, every lie, every attempt to ruin Bianca's reputation. I think the police would be very interested in this pattern of harassment. Rosalie's face turned pale. You wouldn't. Try me, Paul said, his voice cold as steel. The only reason I haven't handed this over already is because of Bianca. She asked me to wait, to give you a chance to walk away. Sonny turned to me, his voice soft. Is that true? I nodded. I didn't want to destroy your family, Sonny. I just wanted to protect myself. Bianca, he reached for my hand, but I stepped back. No. We're done. All of us. I looked at Rosalie, my voice firm. Take your brother and go. Build whatever story you need to explain your failed wedding. I don't care anymore. You're making a mistake, she said, but her voice wavered. The only mistake was thinking I needed any of this. I opened the door. Goodbye, Rosalie. Goodbye, Sonny. They left silently, Sonny casting one last desperate look over his shoulder. Paul stayed behind, watching me carefully. You could have destroyed them, he said quietly. Why didn't you? I picked up a vintage silk scarf, the one that had started it all. Because I don't want to be like her, I said softly. Some things are worth more than revenge. What will you do now? Paul asked. I smiled, feeling lighter than I had in months. What I've always done, find beautiful things that others threw away and give them new life. Just maybe not for the Owen family anymore. As Paul left, I flipped the shop sign to open. Life moved forward, and so did I, surrounded by the vintage pieces I'd restored with love. I realized something important. Sometimes, the most valuable things we find aren't what we're looking for. They're the parts of ourselves we discover along the way. And no one, not even Rosalie Owen, could take that from me. 5 months after Rosalie's failed wedding, I stood in my new studio. The space felt alive, filled with a soft whisper of vintage silk and leather. Morning light poured through tall windows, catching on brass fixtures I'd salvaged from an old department store. Everything in the room had a story just like me. The bell above the door chimed, and Brianna Owen walked in, looking elegant but hesitant. This is beautiful, Bianca, she said, touching a restored Chanel jacket. Francis said you'd done something special with the place, but this is incredible. Thank you. I adjusted a display to keep my hands busy. I wasn't sure you'd come, Francis insisted. He wants to talk about investing in your business. She hesitated, her voice soft. Rosalie left for London last week. I nodded, unsurprised. And Sonny's? He's taking assignments overseas. I think he finally understands what he lost. We all do. Before I could respond, Paul appeared in the doorway. Since the wedding, he had become an unlikely ally, helping me source rare vintage pieces through his business contacts. Ready for the meeting? He asked, then noticed Brianna. Mrs. Owen, perfect timing. Did you tell her about the investment offer? I was just getting to that. Brianna pulled out an envelope and handed it to me. Francis, and I want to help you expand. Your talent for restoration, your eye for beauty, it shouldn't be limited to one shop. Inside the envelope was a business proposal, funding to open a chain of high-end vintage restoration boutiques, with me as the creative director. It was the kind of opportunity one had once dreamed of sharing with Sonny. I don't know, I said slowly. The Owen family and I don't exactly have the best track record with partnerships. That's exactly why it should be you, Francis said, stepping into the room. Someone who chose integrity over approval. Someone who showed us what we had become. And Rosalie? Sonny, I asked. They'll learn to live with it, Francis said firmly. Just like they're learning to live with their choices. Paul touched my arm gently. You don't have to decide now. But don't let what happened stop you from building something amazing. I looked around my studio, taking in the pieces I had rescued and restored, the sketches for designs that were completely my own. Then my eyes landed on something familiar, a bright orange box sitting on the counter. What's this? I asked. Found it at an estate sale, Paul said with a smile. Thought you might want it back. Inside was the Hermes scarf from that first day with Sonny. But instead of feeling pain, I felt something else, closure. Okay, I said, turning to Francis and Brianna. But I have conditions. This will be my vision, my designs, no compromises. We wouldn't want it any other way, Francis replied warmly. Later, after they left, I stood in my studio doorway, watching the sunset turn the city into shades of gold. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. I'm sorry for everything.
N.
I didn't respond. Some things, like vintage pieces, are better left in their boxes, preserved as memories of who we used to be. Instead, I walked to my workbench, where a damaged 1950s evening gown lay waiting for restoration. Its beading was scattered, its seams frayed. But I could see its potential, just like I had finally seen my own. The bell above the door chimed, and a young woman stepped inside, her nervousness as familiar as my own once was. I found this at a thrift store, she said, holding up a worn designer bag. Everyone says it's not worth fixing, but you see something in it, I finished for her, recognizing the hope in her eyes. Let me show you what it could become, I said, leading her to my workbench. As I picked up my tools and started to work, I realized something. The most valuable things we restore aren't just the vintage pieces we find. They're the parts of ourselves we thought were broken beyond repair. And sometimes, letting go of an old dream makes room for something even better to take its place. With each stitch, I began to write my own story, one piece, one moment at a time.